Okay, welcome back for the third part of One Man's Faith. We're looking at two governments, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of government, and that you and I are under two governments. We're under the kingdom. We are heirs. We are citizens of the kingdom of God, but at the same time, we're citizens of the government that we live in. In our case, it's the government of the United States of America, both federal, state, and local. And I just said that according to Romans 13, if you violate a law, then there's a consequence. Okay, that is even if you violate a law that is contrary to God's law, because there's this dichotomy here that God says. God says abortion is an abomination. And so some people want to come against abortion clinics. Well, that's against the law. And so there's going to be a consequence. Now, there can be times, depending on what it is, that God would take you through and out of that situation. Well, let me give you for instance, I think it was either Oregon or Washington, where there was a couple that had a bakery. They were Christians, and they didn't want to do wedding cakes and all for same-sex marriages, and they came under the law. They were actually taken to court. It wasn't really a law. They, they toyed with it and said that it was discrimination. But they suffered a consequence. That's what happens when we try to obey God's law and it's contrary to man's law, which really shouldn't be, because all law, all government comes from God. But we've got to realize that we can, by putting God's law above human law, suffer a consequence. That's just something we just need to see. I said earlier that true government, or the true nature of government, is to cover our weaknesses, empower our strengths, and release us to our destiny. Let me give you an idea or an understanding of that, of how that works. Korea used to be one nation, but in I think it was the 50s, a wall was basically put down between or through the middle of Korea, and you ended up with North Korea and South Korea. Okay, North Korea, it was communist, it was poor, or it has become poor, it has become impoverished, it's failing. They are trying to start something now because they don't have any money. Their people don't have any money. Their people are impoverished. But on the other side of that wall, the same type of person now is in South Korea, where it's democracy, the people are well off. The largest church in the world is based there. And it's thriving. Same people, but the difference is the government. That's how government affects who you and I are and what we do. Okay? Well, Neal, how are we supposed to do this? All right, let's use a biblical basis here. Luke 13. In Luke 13, there's two parables given here that parallel each other. In verse 18, he said, "What is the kingdom of God like? And to what shall I compare it? It is like a mustard seed, which a man took and threw into his garden, and it grew and became a tree, and the birds of the air nested in its branches." And again he said, shall I compare the kingdom of God? It is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 pecks of flour until it was all leavened. You see, a tiny mustard seed makes such a tree that it'll take over the garden. And it can grow so big from a tiny mustard seed that birds can nest in it. In the same way, he says the kingdom of God is like leaven or yeast. You put a little bit of yeast in the dough and the dough rises, okay? My wife uses a bread maker, and you put like a teaspoon of yeast into 3 or 4 cups of flour with water and sugar, and within a certain amount of time, what's a little thing of dough that will almost fit in your hand grows, and in this case, it will rise up to the size of the bread maker. Once or twice, we forgot it was in there, and it started to push the top up. But that's what yeast does. It infects all of the dough. And this is what Jesus is saying. The kingdom of God doesn't have to be a big, grandiose thing, or your presence doesn't have to be a multi-peopled event. You can start a movement, just as yeast will infect dough. Our goal is to make disciples of the nations. So what do? How do we get in there? We need to learn to be as shrewd as serpents. In Matthew 10, verse 16, Jesus says, "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves." We grab the concept, I think, of innocent as doves, but we don't know what it means to be shrewd as serpents. And we always had the connotation that being shrewd or being shrewd as a serpent is a negative connotation. But now, no. Jesus says, listen, you don't have to go in like gangbusters, break down a door and say, "I'm a Christian, here I am, we're going to change things." No. You can infect it by infiltration, by becoming a part. Now, that's anything you do. But if we're going to make disciples of nations, then we've got to infect the government of nations. And what that means is that you and I need to be involved. We just can't sit back and when things go wrong, start to yell. That happens too many times. You ought to go to a supervisor's meeting and watch the faces sometimes of the supervisors. The people that come in and don't do anything but complain are not taken as very reliable. I know if I was sitting there and all you did was come to me, matter of fact, I have people that come to me and complain, and they don't say anything good. How much do you think I listen and move in their direction? Now, they may have a valid point, but when all you do is you come and you complain and you're not being a part, the only time you go to a supervisor's meeting is to complain, then you lose your ability to affect that group of governmental leaders. You know what you should do? I'm going to suggest this to you. Go to supervisors' meetings, sit in the back, take notes, and pray. Don't just go when something's on the agenda because you got some email about this thing's going to be on the agenda, and so we need to rise up and do something about it. No. Start to become a part. You sit there. I remember Bill Johnson once talked that he had a member of his church that would go to, I don't know if it's a council meeting or like a town council meeting or whether it's a board of education meeting. But he would go, he would just sit there. He would take notes, he would pray. And after a while, it got to where they would say, "Hey, Joe, what do you think?" Because his influence was there through the power of God. Because he was there and he watched and he didn't complain. So I want to get involved. Get involved in Rotary. Get involved in the Chamber of Commerce. Get involved in the Town Advisory Board. It used to be the Town Council, but I don't think we have that anymore. Get involved in the Board of Supervisors. Get involved with the Planning Commission. Get involved with the Water Board. Go and sit and listen, take notes, and pray. Ask God for wisdom. Say, "Lord, what would you, if anything, want me to say?" Because if you'll do that, eventually you'll become known. Get involved in the Democratic and the primary committees. Start to make a difference. The platform that the two parties run on starts in the district or in the precincts, i.e., the county. Those ideas are taken and passed up to the state. The state mulls it over, and they take their ideas, which is called a platform, and send it to the national. And then the national is made from those. Those people that run for office sign an agreement that they will abide by and push for what is in those platforms. This is why when we look at our government, we need to not just look at whether we like the person running, but what are they standing for? Think about that for a minute. I got to take one more break. So let's take this break, and I'll be back in just a minute.